Cool. So I have a lot to say in this talk, and I hope it's not too long, but if it is, feel free to emoji in the chat and I will never see it ever again, and that's okay. I knew when we were doing a talk, a lightning talks on women in tech, I wanted to talk about the problems that can occur when women work in tech and what happens when people try to call it out for what it is, which is a problem. I got a bit of a self-gratuitous tweet on the screen, which is from earlier this week when I'd done a lot of reading about this topic, and I realised the tech industry absolutely needs whistleblowers right now. Like, it's absolutely integral. As a new industry, as an exploding industry and a very wealthy industry, we need people to be able to call out issues that might otherwise be swept under the carpet. And I hope this works. Okay, cool. So let me start off with a definition. This is from the UK Gov website. You are officially a whistleblower if you work in a company and you report some kind of wrongdoing. Very vague, and rightfully so. It might be something you've seen at work, but it's not always. The thing you disclose must be in public interest, and all the cases I'm going to talk about today are definitely within that bracket. And you should be protected by law if you're a whistleblower. That means people who whistleblow should not lose their job, they should not face retaliation, they should not be gagged by NDAs or like agreements when they leave or anything like that, that will stop them from speaking out. So they should be absolutely protected. Sadly, in the cases I'm about to talk about, we're not really seeing that. Also really worth noting that in the cases we're going to see, they're all based in America, and they're all predominantly based in California, where Silicon Valley exists, funnily enough. And it's shocking how little protection there is for tech workers in California. So definitely a massive red flag if you're aiming for the Silicon Valley. I am going to change my slide. Cool. So you know what a whistleblower is now, but why does the tech sector need whistleblowers? Why does it need it? Well, the tech sector's incredibly new, in my eyes. It's blowing up. Apparently, according to recent government figures, in the UK, the digital sector accounts for 7.7% of the economy, and it's growing six times more or faster than an average growth rate in the economy. So it's absolutely incredible. And it's vital to our everyday uses, right? Like, everyone here has used tech today to get from A to B. We're communicating over technology. Our medical systems are all software-based. We are using internet banking, and well, banking is entirely reliant on tech. Businesses need it. Education, especially in the pandemic world, it's absolutely insane, the idea of a world without technology companies, to be honest. And with that power comes great responsibility, right? And what if we paired that responsibility with a very large amount of wealth and legal teams and PR companies and marketing and all these things that can make a big, powerful tech company that everyone needs incredibly elusive and able to sweep a lot of things under carpets and silence people from talking about bad things they might be doing but aren't really anyone's problems, according to them. Whistleblowers do a really special thing where they pull back the magical curtain, so to speak, and expose these cracks in our tech industry for what they are. They are cracks, they need to be fixed, they're not things we should be ignoring, and it's in the public interest to do that because technology is something we all use. So we all have the right to be informed on what we invest in and what we buy, and also to be informed on how what we use can be harmful or perpetuate very horrible trends in the real world. So what could we use whistleblowers for, or what could whistleblowers be useful for? Well, they can be really useful to highlight gaps in protection for employees who do blow whistles, which a lot of these cases do, especially now where it's coming out more and more. It's a very new process in a lot of ways, and we're seeing a lot of ways that people can fall through cracks and be really harmed if they ever try to speak out. It's also to highlight hypocrisy. Companies have marketing teams and they can say whatever they like to us, but do they actually mean what they say? Or are they talking a load of B? Who knows? And that is what whistleblowers are able to do. So the first woman I would like to talk about is Ifeoma Azoma, who was at Pinterest for 2 years. And in 2020, she left under circumstances that were absolutely horrific. She was harassed, she was doxxed. There was no punishment for people who were abusing her in her teams. And she had absolutely had enough. She was already campaigning for a pay rise that never happened. A pay rise to equate her to people who were also on her level of skill and responsibility. So, not asking for much. She had already done a lot of amazing policy work in Pinterest. So she was a public policy specialist, and she advocated for the removal of using former slave plantations and promoting them as wedding venues on the platform, and also the crackdown on medical misinformation, which also involved anti-vaxxing sentiments. A lot of her problems started when she suggested that content warnings were put on the posts that were associated with a conservative commentator called Ben Shapiro, who was also associated with far-right sentiments. And that is when she started getting harassed by colleagues. Ifeoma blew the whistle when she had had enough of the hypocrisy of Pinterest. So Pinterest had come out publicly in support of Black Lives Matter in 2020, and that was about 2 months after she had filed a complaint about harassment and a toxic workplace to the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Remember that, you're going to hear about that a lot. And she had to sign an NDA when she settled with Pinterest, when she left, and she was essentially gagged until Pinterest had come out with their support for the Black Lives Matters protests. At this point, Ifeoma was like, "Nuh-uh, we're not going to stand for this. You absolutely do not represent that kind of support. You do not stand by your word, and we are gonna sort of out you for all the sort of inappropriate and harmful sort of workplace practices that you have perpetuated." So she came out, and people came out in their droves to support her. There was a massive wave of worker support in Pinterest for calling out the mistreatment of Black women in the workplace. There was a $50 million budget earmarked for diversity, inclusion, and equality initiatives in Pinterest because of the whistleblowing that she had done. I think there was a case that went to court, a lawsuit, to try them for being a trash company, let's be honest. And it enabled other people to step in their wake. And it wasn't just her, there was another woman, Erica Banks, who would also come out. And people were able to come out and say, "I've been discriminated against and I'm not having it." And I think there was a £22 million settlement, settlement that came after they had left, that went to a chief operating officer who had experienced gender discrimination. So Ifeoma, bit of legend. She also went on to create what is incredible, some incredible work, the Tech Worker Handbook, which is to aid other workers who want to come out publicly about harmful practices that have happened in the workplace. And she came up with a quote that absolutely summarizes why we need whistleblowers in the industry. So would recommend you check out the Tech Worker Handbook. I keep pressing the laser button, that's weird. So what else can whistleblowers do? They can support other workers going through the same experiences. So this lady, Cher Scarlett, incredible activist. She has worked for Starbucks, Activision Blizzard, and Apple from 2020 to 21. Cher has been a advocate for colleagues all through her career, really. When she joined Apple, she joined an environment of secrecy and hush-hush kind of a situation, which started with their products, right? They don't want to get their product secrets out before releases, but had actually leaked into the silencing of colleagues when they're experiencing harmful behaviours like discrimination, wage inequality, harmful working conditions, inability to remote work in a pandemic, which is strange, and general sort of harmful like silencing of that sort. So Cher, when she joined Apple, she became a big advocate for sort of standing up for her colleagues' rights. She helped people get pay rises. She helped them get remote working rights. She helped them get sort of help for the discrimination they'd experienced. And ultimately, she was told to stop talking publicly about Apple's internal issues. And when she was sort of targeted in that way, she then became a target for harassment and ultimately doxing, which is a really common theme with these women. So she was whistleblowing throughout her time. She got harassed for it. And then she fully came out and she was like, this secretive society that is Apple needs to end. They're perpetuating a lot of discriminatory practices and it's not on. She also called them out for their need to, get people to sign NDAs when they leave for discrimination reasons. That was a sentence for sure. So Apple would get people to sign NDAs if they left under circumstances where they were experiencing harm, and then they would be gagged from ever whistleblowing or calling them out or anything like that. And Cher outed them for that. She also called them out for them saying publicly that they didn't do that, which was interesting. And she also exposed a practice within Apple where when people left, Apple would change the registered role that they were under in like credit registries or background checking to an associate, which meant that ultimately their background checks failed and a lot of them got sort of ripped off in the next job search that they went through because they came back as failed background checks, which is a ridiculous practice. Like, why would you do that? So yeah, Cher is pretty incredible. She also designed the 1 times engineer, which is a sort of a flip side to the idea of a 10 times engineer, who is a person that does a billion things at once and is able to code, be an influencer, do coding projects on the side, and also be really, really unhelpful to other people who are entering the industry. Whereas a 1 times engineer goes home, shuts the laptop, and is a general nice person. So she made a manifesto for that. Would recommend checking that out for some good vibes. This is to give attention to unethical practices and products. So we've seen before that tech isn't always right. It's sometimes designed in really flawed ways. And people who work on these products ought to be the people that call it out, right? If they're noticing a trend, if they're noticing a problem, if they think, wait, we shouldn't really be releasing this to the public as a tool that will build wider systems, they should be able to say something. Well, apparently not the case in the situation of Timnit Gebru, who worked for Google for about 2 years. And in those 2 years, she was very into sort of ethical tech. So making sure we're not using AI that is actually perpetuating harmful trends. So, for example, facial recognition that is used in law enforcement, but actually has a really low accuracy rate on recognizing people of color accurately, and especially women of color, which can be really problematic if you're giving it to the police and saying, yeah, cool, use this AI. Timnit actually was reaching sort of the end of her tenure at Google. She was already kind of thinking about going into research. And in 2020, she released or wrote, co-authored a paper about a large language AI, which was used in the Google search engines. And essentially, she and other authors from Google said, look, this AI is kind of gonna give some unknown biased results and also might deceive people without us knowing. So maybe let's do a double take on that. Google responded and said, please scrub this paper of any Google affiliations, please. And she asked why and who told her to do that, please. And they said no. And she ultimately was fired for questioning why her paper that passed reviews and general sort of checks for a research paper was so unacceptable to Google. I think it was because Google didn't like the fact that their technology was being put in a bad light, but it's still a bit contested. The result of her whistleblowing, because she obviously spoke publicly about this silencing of critical conversation on Google technology, was that everyone had eyes on Google and they started seeing the technology for what it was, which is new stuff that needed work on it and wasn't going to be perfect for release. It also drew attention to the treatment of Black women, which is a massive, massive trend in the tech industry, and how they are mistreated. There were like 12,000 Google employees and 15,000 academics that all backed her and said, look, you just fired this woman and she definitely didn't resign. But Google to this day are being pretty weak about it. What it did do was it drew attention. It made people more aware of why Google isn't the ideal tech company. And it also means that any further DEI initiatives from Google are going to be questioned a lot harder. But Timnit's pretty legendary. So yeah, this is kind of a summary of what the paper was basically saying. I'm definitely over time, so we're going to skip this slide. And the final one was to keep the public safe and informed. And this person I'm not going to go into very much, Frances Haugen, she was famously outed Facebook's internal documents and procedures and presentations, essentially saying, look, Facebook's algorithm is extremely dangerous and not safe for our young people or for places that are experiencing tensions of any kind. It was perpetuating like ethnic violence and stuff like that. So terrible, terrible stuff going on. And Facebook just allowed it because it worked in their interest. This is essentially what's going. She's currently working with Congress to basically say, look, you need to be harder on tech companies and what they're allowed to do in the real world. She's also a legend. So other names, other people, there are like so many whistleblowers in the world that have done incredible work, but also got absolutely decimated in career and reputation because companies don't like to be called out at the moment. Be the change you want to see. Like, I just think we need more people to be able to say when something is wrong. And it's not easy, and I hope it will get easier. And with more people doing the work, who knows, maybe it'll be really good, easy to call the company out and be like, you're not doing something right, and also keep your job. That would be great. And that's all I kind of want to say. A bit of a whistle-stop tour, but thanks for listening.